How can it be?
Without expecting it.
Without expecting. How is it possible? Is it philosophy or madness?
Result-oriented action.
Then does it not yield, does it not result in a sense of irresponsibility and casualness in the performance? If it is casualness in your performance, the result is obvious, you may not get anything according to your own standard. The question arises only when you perform well. As we are able to see the life, we are not finding the result everywhere equally being given, even when the most efficient karma is performed equally by all. So, it is not the casualness, therefore Shraddha in your karma has depressed it. Not expecting the result, because result is not obvious. If it is obvious, it would automatically follow. But more often than not, if it, suppose it's coming, the results are coming as expected. Never ascribe that credit to yourself. It is not because your karma has been efficient that you got the results. That universal force has given you the results. Even much more efficient activity could not have yielded the results if that did not decide to give. So in this attitude, you are recognized all the time you are in communion with that supreme force. You are separating yourself from your ahankara as the giver of the results of karma. Your ahankara has elevated itself to submission to that all-pervading force. You have submitted yourself automatically. You are now growing, you are taller. You are in communion with the all-pervading result giver of karma, which has been the giver of the results of your past life's karma as your present life's experiences. So this recognition makes you wiser. Your vision has become wider. You are not taking anything helplessly, but there is no accident that is taking place in your life, but everything is preordained, predestined. So there are no accidents, no fate, no fatalistic view, but destiny has been recognized.
You can't also say I am lucky.
Lucky means you are fortunate because you did good things in the past, that's all about it.
There is no actually word called luck.
No luck, no. If there is luck, there is fate. Luckily, fatally, there is nothing. Only destiny. So what is now in your hand today is not the experience of the results of your past karma, that is not in your hands. Your attitude is in your hands.
That leads me to the next.
Your attitude today to all that you are experiencing is the acquired wisdom of this life. By listening to learned men, following the path of knowledge and wisdom, your attitude has changed. The experience has not changed. Whether you are a yogi or a jnani or ajnani, you have to inevitably reap the results of your past. If you are wiser, you are less troubled. If you are the wisest, you are not troubled. So the experience is the same. Even Ramana Maharshi had a cancer on his hand, on his arm. How come? Yes. So the jnana that you are seeking today, the way, the future that if the present is the product of your own past actions, is not the future in your hands today? So the future destiny of yourself is what you make it today. So you are the master of your future, not the master of the present, because you have already over.
Sowing, reaping.
Sowing and reaping. So future, that gives a great confidence in the man that he is the maker of his destiny and future is in his hands. Therefore the element of fate is removed. The fatalistic view is totally dismissed. In the other religions, your present life is the first and the last one. It is so stupid that it cannot explain anything. Your happiness, wisdom, or lack of it Nothing can be explained. If there is no past, how is the present? If there is no present, if there is a present, there must be a future. It has been logically concluded in our philosophy because it is truth. So, God is not merely referring to your destiny as a result of your past actions, as the result givers of your present actions. There is inherently there another message in it. Your present actions also are motivated by the destinies. And motivated by destinies in all material experiences. Suppose you are a farmer, tilling the soil and reaping, sowing the seeds. You are getting what the earth gives you. It gives you a bounty once, does not give you anything another times. But nevertheless, your action in sowing the seed is motivated by your past actions and tendencies, so that you are getting the result of it. You are destined to get the bounty or not destined to get something. Both are in the destiny. Unless you sow something, how can you not lose? How can you lose? How can you gain? That sowing is your action. Again and again you go to the same soil every year, till the soil and sow the seeds. You keep reaping the harvest, a rich harvest once at one time, not get anything at another time. This has to be experienced by you. So that nimitta karma is indulged in you, by you. So you are not starting any new karma, reaping the results of the past karma only in this karma. So karma is continuous end. The end of past karma is what is being done today. That is the tip end, last finale, the last. The past karma only, you are not indulging in the fresh karma. A man who does not think of sowing anything for future is aware that he is only reaping the results of his past karma. I am not indulging in anything to create a future for myself, good or bad. So he is seeing the end of his karmic journey. That attitude gives you an awareness of the end of your karmic journey in this material world and makes you dismiss the future because you don't want to sow anything for future. While you are sowing the seed in your farm, if you are genuinely thinking that you are only reaping the result of your past karma and I am not starting a new karma, you are cutting off the chain of karma there and there. That attitude is capable of preventing you from performing and starting a new karma for the future build-up. That sankalpa makes you wiser. You are not merely a creature of circumstances, you are the planner of your future. That way it is known as the wisdom of living. So that is answered. Any doubt? What is the dharma during peculiar situations at work or in life? How to determine the correctness of one's action? What is the dharma during peculiar situations? As I told you a story of the last time, I don't know.
She can't just pronounce it.
The dharma is, the correct translation of the word dharma is appropriateness. Appropriate. It can often be anything, totally different, mutually different from each other, in two different situations. Killing somebody may be dharma, Saving somebody may be dharma in two different situations. Even killing someone is quite dharma. Saving somebody's life is also dharma. This is nothing but appropriateness. Appropriateness is governed by certain ingredients like the circumstantial understanding of the circumstances, the background for this action. All these things come into consideration. If you remove your ahankara from your actions, if you ascribe your judgment of dharma to God and do what you think is dharma, you will not be responsible for even if it is other. Judgments cannot be always correct. You might be a retired judge from the Supreme Court. They are bound to err. Erring is inevitable. Any situations, anything. At that time I thought this is dharma and thought of the God and thought that is dharma and then did it. I really do not know whether it is dharma or not dharma, but if it is dharma, God is responsible. If it is adharma, he is even for that he is responsible. So that is why sarva dharman parityajya mamekam saranam vraja. The Gita Vakyam is there very much. Sarva dharman parityajya. So do not keep sitting in judgment over your actions as though you know all the dharmas. You know some dharmas. But you, having known dharma, you may not know all the circumstances leading to this karma. The evidence produced before you is not adequate. The judge is giving his judgment on the basis of the evidence produced before him, not on the basis of the evidence not produced before him. Many things are hidden from him. Many things are not reported to him. So the judge clearly says, having carefully considered all the evidence produced before me in my court, that is how he starts his judgment. He never said, no judge has ever said, having come to know all the circumstances of the case. How does he know? He has not come to know of anything, even half of it, a quarter of it. And the most important thing has been missing in his evidence. The witnesses have not, the police have not produced it. So, you may be perfect judge, but the evidence is inadequate. Facts of the case are not genuinely known to you clearly, totally. So, to the best of your judgment, under the circumstances known to you, you decide this way and leave the correctness or the otherwise of it to the Lord who is the witness to all. He knows everything. He has seen everything. He is witness to everything. There, your ahankara is set aside, put aside. You make the judge, the God himself, the judge, and you don't ask for the arrogate to yourself the wisdom to give the correct judgment. For this reason, every judge is happy when somebody goes in appeal. He is a genuine judge. He is very happy if there is an appeal against his judgment. Somebody else is also verifying my judgment. So the sin is not mine. This is what I said to a judge once. A district judge asked me, for everything that goes in the appeal, what is the sanctity of me giving it? You are happy, must be happy about it, I said. There is a sin committed if the judgment is wrong. If you let off somebody who is a real criminal, you are becoming responsible for the sin. And suppose the higher court convicts him, you have been corrected. If they have agreed with you, you have been confirmed. How are you the loser? Then that senior judge, the 20 years of this judge, he felt prostrate. He said, "No, I understood the secret, sir. Hereafter I will not." This is how a man ought to be happy about what judgment he gives. So there is a witness to it. Similarly, the result of a yuddham, a war. God is his best judge, whether I should win the war or my enemy should win. Both cannot lose, both cannot win. It is obvious. Who wins may not be the appropriate dharma with him, may not have the appropriate dharma with him. Well, in a case we have seen in Mahabharata, Pandavas won the battle. And all of us are agreeing on one point, because they were in dharma, they won the war. Not because they were in dharma that they won the war, because the God was physically on their side. In many cases, the past destiny is playing havoc in throwing the dharma to winds and making the adharma win for that moment. But that is the dharma and adharma of the circumstances of that battle. Well, go a little higher to the next higher plane. There is a destiny of the both. The dharma is losing its battle because of its past sins. The adharma is winning the battle because of its past sins. So the higher, ultimately you have to say, dharma failing in a particular circumstance is quite dharmic. It is strictly in keeping with the rule of dharma. Only dharma, that the other part, half of it, which is not known to us as well. This is how you have to understand. So nyayam, anyayam. Anyaya, there is no anyayam in this world. Yes, I am an honest man, somebody has cheated me. It is anyayam, but that confining the whole issue to that circumstance before your eyes. What is beyond your eyes has also to be applied there. Then my being cheated is not. So the jnani understands this way. The average man with the average knowledge of dharma calls it anyaya. But then, since the law of the land in a mundane world has to govern only the seen world, present world, it punishes the other man for cheating this. It is not supposed to take into account the law of karma. That is prachaksha dharma. One is paroksha dharma.
That's I think the reason why you are reluctant to punish all our servants who go around.
I won't punish anybody because I have been punished properly by my servant by being cheated, because I deserve this. This is the fight. This is there in my destiny. Not I can't call the servant dishonest. He is dishonest. That's all about. That's a different thing. But I got what I deserved by virtue of my karma. So as a jnani, as a wiser man and more elderly than the others, I am supposed to understand the higher, what you call the intonations, the higher messages of dharma, the ultimate dharma also into consideration must be taken by me, and I should not go only by the circumstances of the day before. I have to look beyond that. That is very necessary. So if it is not in my destiny to be cheated, why was I cheated? If it is in my destiny to be cheated, how is he responsible for my destiny? He is nimitta matra. So either way you can't punish him. It's obvious.
No questions.
So only thing is, I must pardon him without manovikar, without any pinch in the. I should not feel the pinch, and I should not arrogate to myself. I am a jnani, therefore I am letting the mouth. And I should not look at myself in the mirror and thank God, and thank myself, pat myself on. That should not. That is not the wisdom. It is the wisdom given by God. Grateful to him. So A jnani is one who thinks that he is not a jnani. This so this Hatha Yoga necessary for a long healthy life. Yes, dharmic living also. Hatha Yoga is the basic platform on which you control your body well. But then after that, it must be used as a platform to take up into the jnana world, the wisdom it must be. Hatha Yoga is only dealing with the senses and the body. In marriage, what are the main points of matching one should look for? See, marriage, one must be open-minded to accommodate the other person. One has to accommodate the other person. Even accommodation arises when you don't like it. But then over a time, that you must be prepared to find certain things which you don't like in the other person. But not find fault with that, but accommodate it. Over a time, with love, affection and tolerance, you must be able to make changes in the other person, if they are changing. Even otherwise, you call it your destiny and put up with it. Then marriages are never broken. Well, people think that they are, ours is a love marriage, sir. See, I said they only loved the marriage.
Wrong in Tamil, sir. Up to when is the love? Till the point of marriage.
Yes. That's what I am clearly saying it. They loved only the marriage. So love marriage. See, the love must start marriage, not end with marriage. That is correct type of marriage. The love must start with the marriage. That has been our heritage. That has been the glorious part, most glorious part of our heritage, our tradition. The love started with the marriage. The so-called love marriages are ending with marriage. That love is ending with it. It may, if it is continuing for a while, it is the momentum. You push a vehicle and goes on, even after the engine is off, car moves for a while.
In the olden days also there used to be a Gandharva style of marriage. Was it looked down upon during those?
No, there are 8 kinds of marriages, 7 kinds of marriages, all have been approved by the Dharma Shastra.
Yes, the Shastra, but otherwise in social custom,
Yes.
was it looked down?
No, it was not looked down. If it is accepted as a marriage, how can it be looked down? See, there are 7 kinds of marriage, all are marriages. Once it is accepted as one form of marriage, how can it be looked down upon? They have been accepted. See, if Ravana had married Sita with consent of Sita, without consent of Sita, that would have been an accepted marriage. That would not have been illegal. Because the Rakshasa way of marriage. Rakshasa. So the law, if you are talking of the law is accepted. The society has to accept the law. Law has been made for the people's acceptance. To make the marriage lawful.
Krishna's marriage with Rukmini.
Yes, Krishna marriage. That's also one. Rakshasa Vivaham need not be done only by Rakshasas. You can also do it.
Krishna's marriage with
That's one of the forms of marriage. That's all about it. That's one thing.
Rakshasa.
So matching we are thinking of matching 2 horoscopes or 2 personalities only when they are as is various condition. That should not continue as is various condition, they should change themselves. The man is not going to change, woman is not going to change, then they should agree that is what we are attempting. Both are changing. Except in destiny, which is not in their hands. In conduct, in outlook, in attitude to each other, everything is in your own hands. So, the love story starts after marriage, does not end with it. Love demands sacrifice. What is it that you can sacrifice? Your ego, your personal, particular tastes, demands. These must be sacrificed and the other person must be accommodated. Then the sense of gratitude is born. Gratitude leads to admiration. Admiration too leads to love and wedlock. That is very necessary. Without doing anything, depending only on the horoscopic influences for the success of the marriage, then what are you doing about it? When you have performed the marriage on your own, decided to marry and something, and then depending on the destiny for success of the marriage. Well, it is nothing but sacrifice. Sacrifice of both. And in such a wedlock, good children are born. Good children means who are good to the society, useful to the society. How can the husband win the respect and admiration of his wife? Just by loving her, that's enough. Love, as I said, admiration also is part of it. In fact, no wife would like her husband to be Don Juan and the great hero in the country and all that. In fact, she does not want him to be hero if she loves him, because there is risk in it. On the other hand, if the husband is trying to run and board the railway train, she discourages him. She does not admire it. Risk it. Safety, security and love, mutual love is nothing. Admiration is by if there are any qualities in the husband which his wife can admire, it is the same qualities that society also admires. There is no difference between admiration of the wife and the admiration of the society. Same qualities are humanly generally recognized as real quality of sacrifice. Suppose we are a great man at the highly charitable. There are certain exceptions, I come to them. They are highly charitable to the extent of giving your salary to somebody. Society admires, wife dislikes. Except these things. There are certain qualities in him. She does recognize, my husband is very charitable, he gave away the entire salary. How am I to live? He's a great man, but a very undesirable husband. Very wrong. So far as a husband to me. Is very wrong. Admiration with disapproval. Admiration with approval is there from the entire society. So this admiration is something, admiration is common, whether it is from the wife or from the outside. Except in things that comes up, that give her the pinch. So, well, there are many things. I am stopping with two questions. We heard that the wives of the rishis used to worship their husbands. How is that achieved? You know, in the Hindu tradition, there is known as Pativratya. It's a very important question. Pativratya means Pativrata. The following the vratam, the vow of worshipping the husband as God, is Ishvara. Ishvara is not the husband. Husband is Ishvara. That is why Tulasi, she cursed Vishnu for having cheated her. You may be Vishnu, Mahavishnu, you may be giver of moksha, but when you came in the shape of my husband, you deserve only punishment. So Tulasi cursed Vishnu because she does not want to accept the Lord as her husband. Husband is the Lord. So that, what is this status given to the husband? So long as he is very honest and faithful to her, giving all the salary to her every first, and not crossing her lines drawn by her. What's the great wonder and speciality that she is, what is the great sacrifice she is making in loving her? How can she not love him? That is not Pativratya. Pativrityam is loving the husband under all circumstances, whatever he may do, may not do. Even when the husband goes to another woman, still loving the husband because he is her husband. Not by his conduct, but merely by virtue of his being her husband. Ordinarily, a woman would not tolerate an unfaithful husband. She would like to mend him or end him. That is not Pativrityam. Mending is different. If he is mendable, she loves him. Otherwise not. That is not Pativrityam. Pativrityam is as it is. He is my husband, he is God, whatever he does. Whether I am happy, he is giving me happiness or otherwise. That is all. That Pativrityam is. That way, most of the Hindu women are extremely faithful. They don't think of a second man. They don't allow their minds to go astray. 99 wives out of 100 in the Hindu society are faithful, good wives, but they are not Pativrityas. In this definition, I am extremely proud of my Hindu society, but 1 in a million is a Pativrata. So that's a different elevation. There is sacrifice. There is a single pointed devotion without trying to analyze the qualities of that husband. There, Sumati is the idea, if you want to examine that. Sumati's husband was a loafer. He wanted the company of another woman. He was a leper. But she went and begged that woman to accept her husband. And she carried her husband on her head. I am not prescribing this Pativrityam principle to any of our women. Let me also be clear about it. Because that is the sure way of spoiling a man.